In the 6th century BC, the Parthenon is still a sacred place. Beneath the current building, we found traces of an ancient temple.
There's always been a temple on the Acropolis. Throughout history, it has been destroyed and rebuilt several times.
To build it, a 2-square-kilometer plateau had to be built, leveled, and filled. Then, 8,000 cubic meters of limestone blocks, each weighing an average of 2 tons, had to be brought in. It was a simple temple with columns that were simple as well, but its size was staggering. 1,570 square meters, with 6 columns on the front and 14 on the sides. The earliest temple, of which nothing remains but the foundations, must have been 75 meters long by 30 meters wide, much bigger than the Parthenon we know. As the city grows, so does the social turmoil within it. In the 6th century BC, discontent is mounting as simple peasants are forced into slavery by debt, and people are fearing the worst. The citizens of Athens are getting tired of the tyrants who've now come to power.
The social tensions obviously comes from the poorer peasants who are simply worried for their freedom. But they have a great influence because there are a lot more of them than the rich landowners.
Once the tyrants were thrown out of Athens, they needed a new form of government in the city. And they didn't trust the old aristocratic families, which had caused all the trouble. So they invented a new system whereby your significance in the state depended on which tribe you belonged to, not which family. And that allowed everybody to be more equal in sharing the government.
It is to the great judge Cleisthenes that we owe the reforms that will be the basis of the new regime.
Cleisthenes is from a very important aristocratic family and is someone who allows the demos, the people, to hold some power.
2,500 years ago, by increasing the number of citizens who could vote, Athens invented the new regime of the future, democracy. The change can even be seen in the layout of the city. The agora, where the city held its debates, is moved to the foot of the mound called Kolonos Agoraios, and the reforms bring with them new buildings out at the edge of the city. Cleisthenes' reforms entrusted political power to 2 bodies. On the one hand, to a council called the Boulé. It met in this square civic building with its 23-meter sides.
There was what we would call a senate. They called it a vouli, or boule, and the building where they were housed was a bouleuterion. And every year, 500 Athenians would be picked to fill the Senate just for 1 year.
Along with this boule comes something entirely new, the People's Assembly, or Ecclesia. Since it is the council that makes the laws, gradually the Ecclesia starts voting them in. That means that little by little, the people start to have some power over the institutions.
Those with a vote are no longer exclusively the wealthiest, although voters still represent only 10% of the population.
All the citizens came together every 10 days to either approve or vote down whatever the Senate had approved. That was also along the side of the Agora Square once democracy was invented.
Laws and decrees were prepared on papyrus or on white wooden tablets. The Boulé was where the city's archives were kept.
There are remains, they're mostly foundations, but we have descriptions that tell us where it should be. And we have a large square building about 30 meters on a side, which seems to be big enough for the 500 participants. They were the ones who were appointed that year. It could be any male citizen could be a member of the Boulé. No women, no foreigners, no slaves, of course.
The new agora is also home to a new feature of the city, the tholos. Circular in shape with 6 central columns, it houses the city's sacred fire. It also serves as a residence for foreign ambassadors. and even has a kitchen to provide them with splendid dinners. And it's here that public honors and accolades are handed out. In the 5th century BC, Athens faces a terrifying danger, the immense Persian Empire. You either submit or you resist. Athens dares to take on the Persians and leads the Greeks to victory in the Battle of Marathon. Yet Themistocles, recently elected as head of state, fears that peace may not last. The only solution is to open Athens to the sea.
Athens' naval power was created as a result of one man, Themistocles, who insisted that the Athenians build a fleet. He was very farsighted and a real statesman, and Athenian power for the next century or more was based entirely on its navy.
At this time, Athens only has a handful of merchant vessels. Piraeus offers the advantage of 3 inlets to the surrounding land. Themistocles will both develop and strengthen the site.
The Piraeus is a natural place because it's got a fortifiable hill, and it has 3 excellent, well-protected harbors, and it was only 7 or 8 kilometers from Athens.
It is neither too far nor too close, so there are many advantages in the Athenians choosing the Piraeus site at that time.
No Greek knew whether or not the Persians would come back, and the Athenians were lucky because they found a great deal of silver in 484 BC, and Themistocles persuaded them not just to spend it, but to use it investing in 200 ships.
Piraeus will be divided into several sectors, with particular importance given to the military port, with its wooden shipyards and its berths for triremes. To the west of the military port stood the international market, the Emporion, with its 5 arches. A covered area for trade and commercial transactions, as well as for storage. There's the grain silo, known as the Long Stoa, where imported grain is stored. The Maritime Stock Exchange, known as the Degma, where the bankers and stockbrokers work. And nearby, the residential area, with its streets laid out in a grid. This grid layout will spread to all the new cities. It's geometrical. The streets are perpendicular to one another, the bigger ones intersecting with the smaller ones. A land battle against the Persians would be doomed to failure since they have up to 1 million men at their command. At the military port, they're turning out 10 times the number of triremes. They had just 20, now there are 200. As warships, these triremes are a real innovation. To scupper the enemy before boarding him, the spurs above the waterline are reinforced with metal plates. Themistocles manages to lure the Persian fleet, 3 times larger than the Greek one, into some narrow straits. It's a splendid victory. At Salamis, the Greeks led the Persians into a deadly trap, and the whole of Athens rejoices.
When the Athenians beat the Persians at the sea battle of Salamis, it made them the leading city of ancient Greece.
Now the Athenians rule the waves, but their city has suffered greatly.
Of course, in 480 to 479 BC, when the Persians leave the Athens region, Athens is totally devastated. Athens is set on fire. The Acropolis is destroyed, completely razed.
It's a disaster. The most urgent thing is to protect access to the sea. The corridor that links Athens to Piraeus will be enclosed by 2 walls, the Long Walls. They will enclose the 2 urban centers, both Athens and Piraeus. Thus, when facing danger, the inner city will have a protected outer harbor and can never be threatened with starvation.
It was a kind of big corridor that connected the 2 cities. So it was a complex fortified site with two heads, one on the plain and one on the sea.
At the time of Pericles, these long walls, 7 meters high, enclosed a narrow corridor 183 meters wide. This was because such a small space could be defended by just a few men and was easily accessed from both sides. In times of peace, this access to the sea has another advantage: to solve the city's food problems. Athens will be able to import the food it lacks and even export its products, including its much-loved ceramics. Before long, half the wheat consumed in Athens is being imported from Evia, Thrace, and Egypt, but also from Greek cities in the Bosphorus and the kingdoms of the northern shores of the Black Sea. The Athenian silver currency rules the Mediterranean market, and the combined incomes of Piraeus and the silver mines are estimated at 65% of the city's budget. Athens is now encircled by its wall and its 9 gates. Within, the city itself is irregularly built, with both wide and narrow streets that wind as they will around the hill. In the working-class neighborhoods, the houses are very cramped, with narrow doors and windows. The light comes from the courtyard, which is the heart of the house's activities. There's just a ground floor with 1 or 2 tiny rooms. The walls are made of wood, raw brick, and pebbles, bound by a mortar made of rough earth.
Mostly the walls were made of sun-dried mud brick, set on a stone foundation, because you have to have it above the water, above damp. But the walls themselves were very easy to make and very quick and very cheap, because it was just mud. As long as you plastered it and kept a roof on it, it would last forever.
People just throw their sewage into the street, and since the streets aren't paved, when it rains, things get pretty sticky.
The Greeks did not pave their roads as much as the Romans did. Mostly it's just packed gravel. It's just pebbles and earth packed down, and the roads build up very quickly over the centuries.
In Piraeus, there's no hill to get in the way. Down there on the plain, everything is neatly mapped out.